Hey everybody. I don't know if you look, I'm on YouTube. I'm doing like the YouTuber thing. Preston had me come on as his guest, and we're gonna do a cool Minecraft video today. Actually, just kidding. We are gonna do something non-Minecraft. We are gonna be talking about the next section of our ancient Rome studies. And here we are looking at our note packet. So we are looking at the next section of our ancient Rome study, and this is talking about Rome as a republic and how Rome as a government has changed. Now, I'm doing this a little bit differently than I have in the past. Instead of me taking the notes and talking while I do it, I'm going to try it with the little camera here, and we're going to look at our filled in notes, and you can pause as we go if you need to, keep up on something. Now, looking at the first page, we have some new vocab. There's quite a few words here. So we're going to probably want to take advantage of the Quizlet I shared before. I'll post that up so you guys can see it again. Some of the words we're talking about are patrician and plebeian. Now, those are two fancy words that describe the two different types of people that were in ancient Rome at this time. Patricians, these were the rich people. These were the people that were in charge. Plebeians, these were like the regular people, kind of like us. Now, the consul was the head of the government. The closest thing I can think of is basically the president. Now, veto is actually something we have today. This is the ability to say no to something. You guys have probably heard that used before. Now, praetors, those are judges that used to kind of interpret the law. So basically, when you think of a praetor, you're thinking of a judge. Now, a tribune is an elected official who protects the rights of ordinary citizens. So the tribune would have been a person the regular people picked to kind of represent them amongst all these other rich people that were controlling the government. Now, a dictator, you might have heard of that before. This is a person that has total power. And in the Roman government, they wanted to avoid that except during times of emergencies. And we're going to talk about that later. And then civic duty is this idea that citizens have this responsibility to help their country whenever they can. Now we're still studying this whole ancient Rome part. Now, at this point, Rome is just the boot. Rome has not taken over the whole Mediterranean yet. It has just taken over kind of what is now Italy. Here's our timeline we have. Now, this timeline is showing us all the main events that happened from about 500 BC to 100 BC. And this is when a lot of stuff happened in ancient Rome. Now, Rome becomes a republic, and that's where we're talking about right here. This is kind of where they have taken over from the Etruscans and started going from there. All these other events, the plebeians going on strike, Cincinnatus appointed dictator, the 12 tables adopted, all of these things will be talked about in this section of our study. And to start with, we're just starting to talk about this first section. How did conflict between the classes change Rome's government? Now, you'll notice this section is blank, so you'll have to listen carefully for what's going to go there. Now, if you've read this section of the online text, it is chapter 11, lesson 2, and it's just that very first page, kind of that first section on number 1, and it's going to have the information we need. Now, how did conflict between classes change Rome's government? So when we're talking about classes, we're talking about people that make different amounts of money that live in different ways. So you have the upper class and the lower class, and those two groups were not in agreement. Now, what caused the conflict? Well, the conflict was caused by people not being treated fairly. So people not being treated fairly. The plebeians were not being treated fairly by the patricians. And we're going to get into that right here. Now, we have these two social classes. You have the patricians and the plebeians. Now, the patricians are the ruling class. That means they're the ones who control the government. These are the wealthy landowners. They own everything. They have all the money. They're the ones that get to vote and make the laws and control the government. The judges and the people that make decisions are going to be patricians. The plebeians, these are going to be the ordinary citizens. It means the artisans, the shopkeepers, the small farms, and the poor people. All the regular working class people are plebeians, or sometimes they're called plebs. Now, the plebs were not always treated correctly. Sometimes patricians would try to rip them off or treat them unfairly in a business job, a business deal, or something like that. And if they went to a court, well, the judge would be a patrician. And the judge is most likely going to kind of side with his patrician friend or his fellow patrician who's going to be the one the pleb is going against. So this was a tricky thing. The other thing had to do with not a lot of laws being written down. So there weren't laws written down to make sure people were treated fairly. So a patrician could basically make things up as he went and just decide, okay, you know what, here's what I think is going to happen in this situation. And it almost never helped the plebs. Now, I do notice I have misspelled plebeians in different places. It's a tricky word. I don't know why they made it so hard to spell. But we're going to look at this little Venn diagram comparing and contrasting the patricians and the plebeians. Now, let's look at what they had in common. Both were Roman citizens. So, a patrician and a plebeian, they were both a part of Rome. They had the rights of a citizen. They could both vote, they both had to pay taxes, and both could serve in the army. Now, this will change during different parts of the history. At certain times, poorer people could not serve in the army, which is kind of an interesting idea. But at this point, we're talking about these are the responsibilities both groups had. So both types of people had to do these things. Now, the patricians, they got to hold public office. That meant they could be a judge, they could be a consul, they could be a part of the government making laws and making decisions. Plebeians could not hold public office. So they couldn't make laws. They couldn't be a part of that government that was deciding everything for them. Now, if you think about it, these Roman citizens were voting, they were paying taxes, they had to serve in the army, and these guys got to do stuff in the government and be in charge. These guys were not allowed to. That is going to make the plebeians pretty unhappy. The other thing the patricians were able to do, they were able to lead public ceremonies to the gods. They were able to be a big part of this process. The plebeians, they were not. They just could show up and be in the ceremony, but they couldn't have the important part. Now, one of these other things, this might kind of fall down to that whole like Romeo and Juliet romance story kind of thing, but if you were a plebeian, you could not marry a patrician. So if your parents were just poor plebs and you fell in love with a girl whose parents were patricians, the law said you could not marry each other. And that would be something that could be a big problem for people. And one of the other things is even if you weren't in love and didn't want to get married to someone, the idea that you couldn't, that a plebeian was not good enough to be married to a patrician would cause tension because anytime one group of people thinks they are better than another group of people, that's going to cause trouble. Okay, so that's the first section of what we're talking about here, the patricians and the plebeians. Um, so if we know the difference, the patricians are the rich people and the plebeians are the poor people, you're going to be in good shape for our next section, which is going to be talking more about the government of Rome. So I will see you next time.